tuning in from. It's brilliant to be back at Granville Studios here, and thank you again for the team for being so wonderful. I'm joined by co-host Alex Abbott, the bearded sales guy, bearded for obvious reasons.
Good morning.
So, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, I'm really excited about today because we have a guest talking about sales enablement. So this guy I met 2 years ago, and since then I've loved the content that he's been putting out on LinkedIn. I'd say it's simple yet incredibly impactful. So I met this guy named Lawrence recently at an event in person, and he was talking about burgers and practice. But I'm going to let him tell you or explain what that means. So without further ado, Lawrence, please introduce yourself and tell us all about your love for burgers and why practice.
And first off, thanks for having me. Okay, so let's talk burgers. So I was born and raised in Chicago. We are a city notoriously known for amazing food, and I love a good cheeseburger. So naturally, when I moved to London, the first thing I did was scour the entire city for all the best cheeseburgers. But the reason I used that in my presentation that you saw a couple weeks ago is that there's an amazing burger that's actually in Atlanta, Georgia. It's not even in Chicago, that they only serve 24 of these burgers once a week. And then there's McDonald's, which is nobody's favorite burger, but it's extremely scalable. So why do I talk about burgers? It's because in sales and in sales enablement, what I see happening is kind of a dichotomy. You have sales leaders who are looking for that McDonald's level scalability, and you have salespeople who are looking to be gourmet chefs. They want to have gourmet chef level skills, and they want to create their 24 burgers, and it's a masterpiece, and you can't change it because they're selling the enterprise. So what my focus is how do I help companies have McDonald's level scalability with chef level skills? And if you can merge those things together, it's a spectrum. It's never perfect. But if you can do those two things, then you have a really high performing sales team.
I love that. But so with that in mind, how does one scale? Whether it's an individual, because our audience are salespeople as well as sales leaders today. So tell us a bit more about how one goes about that.
Yeah. Well, the second part of that is really the answer. It's in the practice. So a lot of people think about SOPs and systems and tools when you think about scaling, which are all very, very important. And I love all my revenue operations people who watch this. But ultimately, what you need to scale a business is you need a culture and people that will scale. So the way that you can build culture, especially when you have a lot of teams who've gone remote now, is by creating opportunities for them to come together and actually develop and work on their skills. That doesn't mean sitting back and listening to a lecture for 10 to 15 minutes or going through a bunch of slides or being thrown a ton of information at them. It means actually taking the time to develop skills that are going to serve them in a sales call.
Brilliant.
Wow. I have to say, Jeff, I was somewhat skeptical about when I was told that someone was going to talk about sales enablement because I hate the subject but you've nailed it because so many people are doing McDonald's and actually to me it's not about the individual, it's about the number. But what you seem to be talking about is it is about the individual being the best version of themselves that they can be, and I love it. Though I am now slightly hungry.
That's great
To be honest, I'm
We'll get a
very
burger after
hungry.
this.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I think in the presentation, if I recall, you were talking about your love for basketball and practice. And, as a salesperson and sales leader, that's probably one of the things that we didn't do as often as we should have done. So tell us why practice is so important to you, Lawrence.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you a quick story that hopefully brings this home. And it won't be about burgers, it'll be about basketball this time.
Okay.
So in college, I played basketball. I moved from Chicago to Atlanta. Let's just back up. I grew up in Chicago in the 90s. So if you know anything about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, if you saw the Last Dance documentary, that was basically my childhood. But I moved to Atlanta, Georgia to play college basketball. And I went to a small Division III college called Emory University. Now, we had a head coach who had just been hired from a large Division I college basketball program, which is the one you see all on TV and the big schools. And he brought with him all the playbooks, all of the plays, all of the practices, and the coaches. He actually brought an assistant coach from his school and implemented that all in our small college. And we thought we were going to be amazing because we had all of the playbooks of the larger school. So that year, we went from last in the conference, dead last, 10 out of 10, to 8 out of 10, which is only slightly better. So before my second year, our coach decided he was going to take us up to the school that he coached at, and we were going to play against in an exhibition game against that team, which we would never play during our regular season. I guess here you guys would call it a friendly. So we played a friendly against this college, and the college is called Davidson College. And at the time, they had a small, scrawny point guard who looked like he was about 12 years old, and his name was Steph Curry. So I don't know if you know too much about basketball. I know this is a football country, but Steph Curry is a
And
really good
rugby,
basketball player.
according to Andy. Yeah.
You know what? Rugby World Cup, I'm a big fan. But I will say, if you know anything about basketball, you probably heard about Steph Curry before. He's one of the best basketball players of all time. And I played against him in college, and they torched us for about 50 points. They were running all of our sets. We knew every play they were going to run. We knew everything that they were going to do, and we just couldn't stop it. And so after that season, going into the second season, we knew we weren't very good, and we understood the gap between where we were and what good actually looked like and what we should be accountable for. So the difference between our first season and our second season is the level of practice went to a different level, the level of focus, the level of communication, because we understood what we were trying to do and what we were trying to be, and we saw what good looked like. So long story short, we finished the season 3rd out of 10, which is a huge jump. And within 4 years, we were one of the top teams in the conference in terms of went deep into the conference tournament. So the moral of that story, all I want you to get from that is that you can have the playbooks, you can have the Sandlers, you can have the med pick, the social selling, whatever the playbook is, those are made by extremely smart sellers who have tens of years of experience. But you need to take the time to actually put that into practice and actually develop specific skills. And you need to understand what good looks like when you go into doing that. So that really changed how I view practice. And that's a feeling I've been searching for throughout my professional career.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Now let's bring in Adam, because Adam has the perfect basketballing physique.
Yes, it's like Magic Johnson.
Yes, that's exactly. But I have the perfect physique for a basketball, I think, rather than for playing basketball. But I think what's really interesting, Lawrence, was looking through the content that you shared. Two things that you speak about really resonate with me. So the first of them is that there's a big difference between knowing and doing. And when we talk and coach people basketball, it's very easy to impart knowledge, very easy for people to understand at an academic level what it is you're asking them to do. Something entirely different to put that into practice. So that really resonated with me. But the other thing was learning from your mistakes. And I think that again is a really crucial thing. You know, in the current climate, the current world, people are vilified for making mistakes. They're not embraced as part of the learning process. And I find that amazing, because nobody can be brilliant at something first time out. You know, your evidence in point, your basketball team got all of the right tools, you go out to play and you get absolutely hammered. And actually, you know, that's something that we see time and time again, that people need to find their feet. They need to trial different things. They need to work out what's going to work for them and what isn't. I think, and that's particularly true in sales, which is a dialogue. You know, and I know what I'm going to say, and I know how you should react. That isn't necessarily how you do react, though. So those 2 points of what you speak about I find incredibly engaging.
No, I really appreciate that. And something that kind of speaks to that is, I think in sales, we're not really given the ability to fail because of you have goals, you have a number to hit, you have short-term wins. And so teams that embrace failure, I find to be the most successful. And it's counterintuitive, but what I see happening a lot of times, even during practice sessions, let's say you're running a role play with your sellers, you're not actually in that improvement mode. You're in what's called performance mode, which means I want to show my managers, I want to show my VPs and everyone that I'm extremely competent, I know what I'm doing, and I'm an extremely capable seller. So what happens during performance mode is I'm not going to try things that I'm uncomfortable doing. I'm only going to do the things that I know work well, or that I'm comfortable, or that I've done in the past. So
Mm.
if you're in performance mode, you're not really going to get any better because you're not stepping outside your capabilities at all. And so, yeah, maybe you don't fail, but also you don't grow. Whereas in improvement mode, you're purposefully pushing yourself to the point of failure. You're pushing yourself to the point where you get uncomfortable and you're making mistakes, and you're probably going to look a little bit stupid in the process. So if you don't have a culture that supports that, then no one's going to be willing to push themselves outside of what they're normally capable of. And you're going to, rather than have 10 years of sales experience, you'll have 1 year of sales experience repeated 10 times over.
I think that that's really interesting, because I think it's a big cultural issue in organizations. You know, everybody talks within all organizations that I've ever engaged with or worked within. Everyone talks about how this is a safe space. You know, you can make mistakes here. And actually, you can't. Because if you're in a sales presentation to a client, the worst thing that can possibly happen is that you don't make the sale. If you're in a role play environment internally with your boss there, you do it badly, and the worst thing that can happen is you get fired. So actually creating that culture is a really big issue, isn't it, for organizations?
Yeah, it's a tough one to do, especially when you have numbers to hit, you have goals to focus on. I understand the pressure that's being put on chief revenue officers and VPs of sales, but in terms of what I try to do in sales enablement is to create a little bit of an insulation layer so that the team had the ability to try new things and develop.
What I do genuinely love about this, Lawrence, is you've just said three things that link to three papers that I've been reading as part of my own research. So the first one is about psychological safety, and everybody knows Amy C. Edmondson outside of Harvard. So that exactly to that point about a psychologically safe culture is going to make that happen. But you then also touched on, there's a great author called Young. He released a paper called Learning in Practice, and he looked at something like 30 professions and basically said to get to journey person in any profession takes 10 years, to get to expert takes 20. But we've had this debate on SalesTV that actually in sales, yeah, you're right, we don't ever take people to 10 years. In learning, we take them through the first year time and time and time again. It's negotiations, and therefore you're right. That comment you just made, which is they don't get to 10 years, they get to 10 times one. But then there's this other, I don't know if you heard of Erickson, who's quite a big academic, but he talks about deliberate practice. And his entire thing was about the difference between someone who's a high performer and someone who's not is all about practice and how many hours that you put in. And somebody challenged him and said, well, actually, it's not, it's about genetics. And it split the field. And as a basketball player, then he argued, well, there's two people of Lawrence's height. Okay, I accept you can't all play basketball. If you're 5 foot, you probably can't play. But if you then look at the two versions of Lawrence, the one that practices more will be the more successful. So he kind of proved it out. But again, in sales, we don't look at that. We have these wonderful analogies in sales based on All Black Rugby and Alex Ferguson, but we never look at what does it take to practice, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So deliberate practice, that word is really important. That's the basis of what myself and my co-founder Jonathan created the Practice Lab about. It's the idea that all practice isn't created equal, and you need to have a clear picture of what good looks like. And you also need to be very focused on what specific skill you're trying to develop. You can't run a 30-minute role play and then have 10 pieces of feedback at the end and expect someone to get better at the end of that. Rather, let's chunk it down into just the moment that your prospect gives you an objection. And rather than jump into our bag of objection overcomes and shoot one back at them, let's just take a moment to acknowledge what they said, acknowledge how vulnerable they had to be to actually say it, and then ask a question that's led with curiosity to get more information about that objection before we jump straight to the objection overcome so that their walls don't go up. That's a key moment that happens in a lot of sales calls, that we can spend 10, 20 minutes just focusing on that 2 to 3 minute segment, and then give a little bit of feedback, and then we work on it again. Maybe we change our tone, then we get their tone right. Okay, now let's change our words or the question that we ask. Okay, now we got our tone and our questions. Now let's change our body language. And then we stack those things on top of each other until we've developed that skill, and then we move on to the next piece.
Yeah. You see, I told you you'll like this discussion.
You did.
Andy.
You did. You did. Is there more to show though? Is there some slideware we've got or some images?
Well, there is, but I'll leave that up to Lawrence. One thing that I've loved about your content, Lawrence, is as I said before, it's how it delivers, simplicity. That it's such simple diagrams that you use, but I find them so impactful. They really kind of hit the mark. I don't know if now is the time you want to bring some of your slides up and show us, or
Yeah, let's jump into it. I'd love to.
okay.
Okay, so this first one is how you get chef level skills with McDonald's level scalability. And there's really three components to be able to do these things. The first one is accountability, process. Process accountability, really what that means is what good looks like. So we know what Davidson and Steph Curry's team is able to do. We know we're not able to do it. So it really highlights that second layer there, which is the skills gap. And so then we have to be capable of actually developing those skills. So you have your practice capability to reach your process accountability. And if you can't reach that, then the things you're being asked to do, you're not actually capable of doing. So as a seller, if I'm being asked to do things that I don't know how to do, then and I don't have the opportunity to practice, that's only going to make me more anxious. That's going to increase anxiety because I realize I'm not doing everything that I need to, but I don't know how.
That's the problem.
And then the third piece, once I'm
sorry to jump in
No, go
there,
ahead.
Lawrence, but that is the problem
Yeah.
that salespeople all over the world are experiencing right now, and it's affecting their mental health.
Yeah, I mean it's all interlinked.
Yeah,
But let's keep going, Lawrence. This is this is really good stuff.
No, sorry, I'm on a roll. I was gonna say, think about LinkedIn. You scroll LinkedIn and you have so much good information, but also it makes you aware of the stuff as you're doing your job that you're not thinking about. So if someone introduces a new idea and everyone is in a rush to be so smart on LinkedIn and say, "Oh, did you think about this?" or "Were you considering this?" And you might think, "You know what? I wasn't thinking about that." Now I'm actually stressed because now that's one more thing I've got to incorporate into my workflow that I'm not sure I know exactly how to implement. So that just highlights the stress that can come from that skills gap. And then the last piece of that is once you've done something correctly one time, it doesn't mean that you're going to do it correctly every time. So performance reliability is where the real scalability or growth potential comes into play. Because once I've done something successfully once, that's a big gap that we've crossed. But now I want to do it consistently over time, over and over. And that's where my growth actually reliably performing at a high level. So those are kind of the three levels that you need to achieve to have McDonald's level scalability with chef level skills.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Still hungry.
I'm going to stop with the McDonald's.
Yeah.
McDonald's is still serving breakfast right now. We got to wait another hour and a half before we can get a burger.
No, nowhere near Cranfield, mate. We'll be looking to find a McDonald's in about 25-mile radius, but there you go.
Adam, I can't help but Adam, I can't help but think about with the guitars in the background, how this is resonating with yourself, a musician.
Are you trying to say he needs more practice?
He is.
It's a very subtle way. Take them off the wall and play them occasionally.
Absolutely. Building those foundations is crucial, and it isn't just in sports and music. Clearly, embedding those skills. I mean, my guitar teacher said to me, "You need to practice enough, not that you can get it right, but that you can't get it wrong. So it becomes like a muscle memory to do things." And you need to practice all elements of it. And I think that this is, certainly from a musical perspective, this is one of the things that people get wrong. They practice the instrument, but they don't practice the performance. So, when you're selling, it's all very well to learn your presentation, learn how you're going to deliver it, learn the objections in the comfort of your own office. It's something else entirely to take that into the live war zone and try to deploy that when you're under pressure. And I think that one of the things that all salespeople, in fact, anybody that has a performance element to what they do, by performance, I don't mean results, I mean performance as in standing on stage type thing, they need to get an environment where they can practice that element of it, because everything looks different when you're on the stage. It's very easy to forget your words. It's very easy to forget your train of thought. But yeah, it's all about practicing it until interruptions don't interrupt the flow of what it is you're trying to do and say. And I think that your point about learning from your mistakes is crucial. You know, the only way you get to know how to recover a sales pitch if something is going wrong, or recover a presentation if something is going wrong, is to have done that a number of times.
So here's the thing. So I think it would be quite easy to understand whether you're a good performer or not in the way that you play music and the sounds that you hear and the way it makes you feel. But when I think about sales enablement and quantifying the value of sales enablement, I'm thinking, well, it's a bit more like marketing. You know, how do you quantify the value of it? And, you know, when we think about either defending your position as a sales enablement practitioner, or perhaps a sales leader wanting more sales enablement support for their teams, how does one quantify the value of sales enablement effectively, Lawrence?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one that a lot of sales enablement people are hearing from their bosses right now. If you go to the third slide that I actually shared, I kind of come up with a little bit of a framework for this. So basically, here is more talking about accountability, capability, and reliability, which we've touched on. So this is kind of how you take $100 million strategy and it becomes a $10 million impact. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit more of how I think about actually measuring this the impact. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide,
Will that be the fourth
I'll
slide?
let it pull up. There we go, that one. So this is actually the third one. So a lot of times when people try to measure the impact of enablement, you think about activity, which is typically how many calls did I make, how many emails did I send, how many meetings did I hold, that kind of thing. So activity, but we know that activity doesn't really equal impact. So I like to look at who are the laziest sellers on my team who are still hitting quota, and what are the things that they're doing to actually achieve that. So on the other side, you have impact, which are things like win rate or average sale price or sales cycle length. And these things are really important, but it's really hard to tie that back to enablement. So if we had a great win rate that quarter, maybe product released a couple new products and they're saying, hey, that was all us. Or maybe marketing came out with some new collateral that they got us a lot of more leads. And they say, hey, that was us. So there's a lot of other cooks in the kitchen that could impact your win rate. So when I look at what I can show that sales enablement actually impacted, I look at the sales outputs. So what are sales outputs? Are things like your business case that you collaborate on with the buyer, or maybe your notes that you have in Salesforce. Maybe it's a territory plan. Maybe it's a mutual account plan. Your account maps. These are all things that every seller has to do that are outputs of the seller experience. If you look at the seller journey, they have to engage with these pieces of collateral that they create or collaborate on. So what's of those actual documents? In order to have a quality business case, you have to have quality conversations. In order to have quality conversations, you have to be a good listener. You have to be able to respond to objections. You have to have all these skills that give you the ability to create an amazing business case with your customer. So that's what I like to look at, because I can show very clearly that before this quarter, we had an average of 1 contact per opportunity. And after we ran a multi-threading training, now we have an average of 3 contacts on every opportunity. That's a very specific skill that we try to drive, a very specific behavior for that output. And that's something that we'll use to kind of measure that. So I like to look at outputs versus activity, which is a little too leading, or impact, which is a little too lagging.
Yeah, I love that. Last week I heard an example of a leader within an organization that was driving cold calling blitzes and then attributing different opportunities to the blitz to kind of defend their position that they were doing a good job to get leadership and the C-level off their back. And I'm sure that happens a lot. But what you're describing sounds far more strategic, requires a more thoughtful approach to really quantifying that value, which is good for the sales people, it's good for the team, and it's good for the business. But why are we seeing sales enablement professionals being laid off in the last 12 months or so?
Because they're not very good at it.
Right.
So we've got an expert on here who's looking at all of the things that are correct versus somebody who's probably been told by a sales director, I need this solution.
Yeah.
The best sales
that's a
enablement
part
people.
of it.
Go on, sorry, Lawrence. We're close to time, so you
Yeah.
have the last words.
Oh, sorry. No, I'll take the compliments, but I will say I've seen a lot of amazing enablers also be laid off. And that's just some of it is part of understanding how to communicate that value to your C-suite, to your leadership. Sometimes it's not a problem with the work that they're doing, it's a problem with how they actually communicate that, the changes and the behaviors that they're focused on. And what you have end up happening is the reactive, in the moment, random acts of enablement saying, hey, let's run a training to do a call blitz versus saying, hey, let's be strategic about what we're focused on and let's pinpoint the specific behaviors that will drive win rate or that will drive close deals. So I think there's some great enablers out there, but I think that sometimes we struggle to communicate exactly how we're being strategic when we go about our jobs.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
ending. So thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you, Adam. Keep practicing the guitar. Thank you, everybody, for the great comments. Chris Capon, Dale Childs, and everybody else. And thank you for the team here. And we'll see you on episode 2 later today.
Bye all.